Good morning again, everyone. It is now 5 minutes past 11. My name is Marais Wiggett. I work for AREP and I will be hosting the event today. Welcome. It is so lovely to have all of you here with us. It looks like most of us has joined the meeting, so let's get started, shall we? Just a quick overview of today's meeting. We are going to be talking about a few very interesting things, I think. We have, as is our new policy, I guess, we have a promotion for everyone that's attending. So if you are willing to stay till the end of the meeting, we're going to give you a code to get 20% discount on your company membership with AREP. Then we're going to be talking about some statistics and survey information that we have for you. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the report that we finalized. We discussed some of those statistics last month, but the report is finally finished, and you are the very first group of people that will have a detailed look at it. We're excited to share that with you. And then we will have our guest speaker, Wilna, who is going to talk to us about HR principles for SMMEs, specifically focused on the solar PV industry and the energy industry. So we're very excited to hear her talking. All right, so the first little section, Anne, could you talk us through the first membership statistics, please?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, so to date we have 4,164 members. We are growing rapidly, which is very good. Company members, currently we are standing on 125 company members, and as Maria mentioned, we are running a promotion today. So stay tuned until the end of the meeting. You will then be able to get the coupon code, which will give you a nice discount on your company membership. Founding members, we have 20 at the moment. If you need more information on that, you can also just email me and I'll provide you all the relevant information you need. With regards to the P4 tests, to date, we have 217 of our members who went through the P4 accreditation process. They are all now successfully P4 accredited. So that is the update on the statistics for this month. Thank you, Marisha.
Thank you, Anne. That's really good news. We are excited to be growing at such a healthy pace. And remember, if you have, as a member, the body exists primarily to serve its members. So if you ever have any questions, if you're a new member and you don't know what's going on or where we slot in or what benefits you have since becoming a member, please feel free to reach out to Anne or myself. We will put our email addresses in the chat. So this next section, we have asked Carel Ballack, the president of AREP, to talk us through some of the information that we gathered over the past month and to just give us a little bit of an overview of what's happening in the solar PV industry right now. Carel, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria. Is it possible to maybe share your screen and just show the graphs, please? I'm kind of in between meetings, so I'm presenting from my phone.
So the screen is shared. See that?
Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay, that helps. Thank you very much. So, guys, we did some surveys, and we've had interesting results out of the surveys. I think what is written on the slide is fairly obvious. I'm not sure how many of you have are also logged in through your phones. So for those of you that can't read what's on the slide, it says, how long have you been involved in the renewable energy industry? And the most or the highest percentage is 35% with guys between 3 to 5 years involved in the sector. Now, what's interesting, and it struck me the other day, was that the P4 certificate and the PV green card are both quality assurance programs, and they've been they were launched, if I remember correctly, in 2016 or was it 2018? I think it was 2016. So if we look at that, then the bulk of guys that have ticked the 5 to 10 years block would have been involved in the industry roughly during that initiation process. So the guys that are involved in industry, the 14% of guys that have been involved in the sector for more than 10 years, those were guys that were known as tree huggers. And they were far out. Effectively, you'll find that and now this is an interesting statistic. If you look at the type of guys who did installations before the P4 certificate started, there were very few of those guys that were actually electricians. So the 15% of guys represented at the bottom of this list were the weird guys in industry who were busy doing installations and doing stuff that kind of fell outside of the electrical sphere at that time. And it was it would be the kind of 3 to 5 year business guys who would form a larger percentage of the electrical contractors. Now, it's interesting to look at the electrical contractors now feeling that their market is being threatened when they're actually getting into a market that they previously didn't want to be part of. But anyway, I'm just going to leave it there. Mariesha, we can flip over to the next slide. So this slide says, which option best describes your involvement in the renewable energy industry? What's the biggest part? Would be construction development, electrical contracting, EPC, and solar PV installations. This is just a nice demographic of what our membership base consists of, and 90% of the guys in AREP do installations and do designs. Are you considering making a change? So guys, since about June, July last year, we've seen a significant drop in the amount of load shedding cycles. In fact, since the beginning of this year, it has even escalated with virtually no load shedding happening. In Joburg, of course, we've had a number of places where transformers have failed and the guys have been out for a couple of days, and they didn't call that load shedding. I don't recall, what did they, load management or something. So it wasn't on the Eskom load shedding app. It was just a number of areas that had extended periods of no power during maintenance being done on some of the transformers. Because of the load shedding having fallen away, the residential sector has absolutely fallen flat. There's nothing happening in the residential sector. We have members reporting from all over that they are quiet. The number of quotes that they're processing is substantially less. The number of projects that are approved is substantially less. So if you have a solar business and you're going through a tough time, it would be because you form part of the group of guys that are primarily involved in the residential sector. Now, it's always been something that I've been talking about and that I've promoted, is to have a business that is diversified so that you don't just rely on a single source of income. And we've had because of the steady growth of solar over the last couple of years, we've had guys who have closed down certain sections of their previous businesses simply because they were so busy and so involved with solar that it was a real good run. It was 2 solid years of growth, which was amazing. But you've got a lot of guys finding themselves in the position where they all of a sudden they don't have work. So a lot of the guys that I've spoken to have gone back to doing what they previously did, regardless of what it was, anything from farming to swimming pools to printers to construction. There's a there's a diverse range of guys that form part of the solar industry. So some of the feedback we've received from some of the contractors are, we are not opposed to branching out, and I'm reading what's on the screen at the moment. So those of you that aren't watching the screen and just listening to me talking, this is what's written on the text. Is so we are not opposed to branching out and incorporating new products and services into our portfolio, but are making sure we keep doing the basics that have worked for us in the past. Change is always good and necessary, but trying to do too much too quickly can lead to failure to meet customer expectations and damage our reputation. Flip over to the next one, please, because I see the next one says, I most certainly do not want to change, but it seems that the demand for solar has drastically dropped. If it continues this way, one would need to look at finding an alternative source of income. Guys, that alternative source of income might very well be the commercial and industrial sectors. So we find that the commercial and industrial sector at the moment is alive and well. There's a lot of demand in industrial installations, but we find a lot of the guys who were busy with smaller installations lack the confidence to install big installations because your risks are much higher. Your risks are much higher. The amount of engineering that goes into bigger projects is significantly more. And you need to have different types of equipment. So for larger installations, you might have to have a logger to manage load profiles, check power factor correction, and that kind of thing. Marisha, can you skip over to the next one?
That's the final slide.
Okay, that's excellent. So I think what the message is out of this is, if you are involved in the industry and you are busy going through a tough time, you need to try and find an avenue where you can get involved in the industrial commercial sector. How do you do this? Well, you could start getting involved by attending courses on how larger inverters are installed, and try to wrap your head around what goes into commercial installations. You probably need to make friends with an electrical engineer so that he can sign the designs off, or you need to find a way where you can find a resource that can support your company or your business in commercial and industrial installations or commercial and industrial design, if that's not part of the service that you were currently or that you are currently offering. Marisha, I think that brings me to the end of my slot. We have created that report, Solar PV Risk Insights, which the guys have access to. If I remember correctly, can you? I think I'm going to finish off and say thank you very much. Thanks for listening, guys. Good luck with your business. Thanks for joining the meeting. I hope you get some additional information to assist your business, and looking forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thanks, Marisha.
Thank you very much, Carel. Appreciate your input. If anyone has any questions about what Carel said, please go ahead and put that in the chat box, and then we'll address it at the end of the meeting, if possible. All right, so the next section, we are going to take a quick look at the brand new report that AREP has compiled. It's not a very complicated report, but we do feel that it will clear up some questions that are prevailing in the market from various stakeholders. And we wanted to just lift out 2 or 3 things to you and give some context so that you have the inside scoop because you are members. So why not give you an inside scoop? The PDF is available in the chat if you need the PDF, or if you want to share that or have a look at the entire report. But let's look at some of the most interesting things that emerged based on the research that we did over the past few months. So what we did is we contacted all of our P4 level 2 accredited practitioners, and then we asked them a few questions. We found out a little bit more about their day-to-day, what they're experiencing in the field, and what emerged were these different risks that you can see on the screen right now. Let me just go back. There we go. So these risks that you can see on the screen are the most prominent risks that was lifted out in our conversations with the members and during the survey. So these risks were poor installation practices, substandard and uncertified products, weather damage, inexperienced or unaccredited installers, public ignorance, unclear standards and regulations, and maintenance. And if you can see on your screen the different values given to these different risks, the most prominent risks was the poor installation practices. That was 53% of practitioners lifted out that specific risk based on what they've seen in the field. And secondly, they lifted inexperienced or unaccredited installers at 15%. So that we found that very interesting. And so we used the information that we gathered to address these risks and give ways to mitigate them in the rest of the report. So we'll get to that just now. I'll show you a couple of examples of what we did to address these risks and to give stakeholders a way to manage these risks associated with developing solar, installing solar for their homes or businesses. So what we mean with poor installation practices, what comprises poor installation practices is it's various issues highlighted by the respondents, and it includes inappropriate designs, loose connections, faulty wiring, incorrect installations of products, general poor workmanship. So that's all. Whenever someone mentioned something like that, we grouped it into poor installation practices, and at the end of the day, that was the biggest risk that emerged from our survey. And I think that's important to take note of when you are speaking to a client. It is more likely than not that he or she is considering this risk in their heads because they are made aware of these kinds of things amongst themselves. When someone installs a system and they're talking to their neighbors or their friends about how the process went and what's currently happening, these kinds of things tend to emerge. And if you can keep in mind the different risks that the stakeholders are currently fearing, it's easier to address that when you are trying to make the sale or trying to convince a client that you know what you're talking about. So the second thing we wanted to lift out is there has been a lot of publicity around the risk of fire involved when you install solar PV, especially battery fires. There's been a lot of hype around that. And we decided, let's find out from practitioners what they are seeing in the field and how that affects their work day to day. So what we did is we asked practitioners, have you ever been called out to inspect or repair a solar PV system that has suffered fire damage? And interesting enough, 85% of the respondents said no, they haven't ever been called out to inspect fire damage. They've never, they've never encountered that in their experience as a practitioner, in their entire lifetime as a practitioner. We didn't ask them within the past 3 months or the past 6 months. We asked them in their entire experience with solar, have they ever encountered that they needed to go out to look at a site that has fire damage? 15% said yes. And then of the 15% that said yes, we tried to find what was the root cause of those fires. And again, what emerged was, first of all, the most prominent risk was poor installation practices. 88% of the respondents that said yes indicated that the fire started because of basically poor installation practices. And then the second and the third reason was substandard and uncertified products. And the other one was hail damage that emerged. So it is interesting to note these things when you have a conversation with clients and they are raising this risk of fire and this fear of fire. You can point them to this document that we have. You can give them this to give them some insight on how to manage the risk that they are fearing. And I think it'll help definitely to just alleviate some of the fears that are running around in the market. Let's look at the next part. So this is the part of the report where we took the most prominent risks and then we gave the stakeholder a very practical way to mitigate that risk. So for instance, when you look at poor installation practices as the most prominent risk that emerged from the survey, we suggest that stakeholders look at something like a test report. Obviously, AREP has its own test report, so we will be promoting the hybrid test report. But as Carel has mentioned in previous meetings, these test reports, the ECB test report, the hybrid test report, they all have the same authority, if I can put it like that. There's no solar report right now that is mandatory, but we do suggest that the practitioners get into the habit of supplying a hybrid test report for their clients as an added measure of safety. That's first of all to check your own work and just make sure that nothing was missed. Maybe you know, it's a big project. There's a lot of things going on. Something like this just helps you to make sure that you've covered all of your bases, and it also gives the client a lot of confidence and just assurance. So the hybrid test report is obviously freely available on the AREP website. If you don't know that, you can go to the AREP website. You can download it for free. We have a PDF version and we have an Excel version. The Excel version you can use to add your own logo to the report and make it a little bit more personal for your clients. And if you want a printed version, then you can order your printed booklets from AREP, and then we just courier that to you. But the report itself is freely available on the website. And then another risk that we highlighted, which the second most prominent risk that emerged, was inexperienced or unaccredited installers. And what we suggested as a mitigation is for clients to look at solar PV accreditation. So naturally, AREP hosts the P4 program. So we gave a little bit more information about the P4 program and what that contains and how end users can find out more information about that. So that's an example of what is happening in the report. Please have a look at it, read it, share it with your clients if you think it'll be helpful for them. And let us know if you have any questions or any suggestions based on the report. That is it for that section of the meeting. And now it is my great privilege to introduce Wilna Marais. She is a solution specialist at Zeal HR, and we asked her if she would be able to just talk to us a little bit about basic HR principles for small, medium enterprises in the solar PV industry specifically. So we did give members the opportunity to send questions in advance. If you still have a question right now, please give it in the chat box. If you have a question while Wilna is chatting, please put it in the chat box. Wilna is going to take some time and investing some quality time in answering any questions that anyone on this call might have. For now, Wilna, I'll hand over to you to just share your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you, Marisha. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone else for joining. I think when people hear HR, we generally cringe. We're the stepchild of all professionals, yet we're in every business, and particularly in smaller businesses or SMEs, you wouldn't have a dedicated person doing HR, and HR always or often falls by the wayside. I'm very well aware, having been in the industry for nearing 20 years now, that you know, we're the stepchild. So just that as an opening line, I think HR is always a bit of a grudge purchase because it is compliance. It's a macroeconomic environment that gets enforced in your business. You know, it's legislated. I think if we're looking at sort of a broad overview of HR, the framework is employers and employees and how they interact. A lot of it is paperwork. And I think a general sweeping statement, if you're a practical person or a business owner, your focus is on growing your business, on getting revenue into the business, and on doing your practical work. And HR then becomes an administrative function, but it can become a very expensive administrative function if not managed correctly. So basic things that would need to be in place is, what is the relationship between a staff member or somebody that you are utilizing to render services to your business? Is it a registered business that you're dealing with, or is it an individual? What many people don't realize, because they would say, you know, I use somebody as and when I need them, so they're not an employee. I think the big surprise is usually if somebody works for more than 24 hours in a month for you, on a consistent basis, they are an employee if they're not invoicing you through a different business entity. So that would be things like having contracts in place. What should be in a contract, for instance? If we're looking at leave allocations, be that annual leave, sick leave, what should the person be paid according to the industry norm? If there's a bargaining council that regulates your industry, even though you might not be a member of the bargaining council, once the members of the bargaining councils have made a decision and they've extended that to industry, it's automatically applicable to your business. Should you not meet those requirements and you are indeed audited, they can get a court finding against you and you can be held liable. And these, be it either fines or just becoming compliant, does have the ability to chip away at your cash flow, if not close your business doors. So you would need to look at, I think, particularly in your industry, health and safety, obviously. So IODs, for instance, if people get hurt, if people suffer any sort of injury, you are liable for that. So you need to be registered with the Compensation Commissioner, UIF, pay slips. So it's so broad. There's so many things that one needs to look at. And I think that's what makes it difficult from a day-to-day perspective when running your business. So I think perhaps just to zoom out and zoom in, you're looking at externally compliance that can be imposed on your business from a bargaining council, and you need to look at having the relationships with the people that you're doing business with that you might think are external providers at this point in time, might be deemed as employees, and having that paperwork up to date. So I haven't prepared much of a presentation because I wanted to hear practically from you guys, what are the difficulties that you are experiencing, if there are any questions. I see there's one question that comes through on email, and I'm sure that Marisha would share it with everyone. Is it, because in my mind, you guys wouldn't have the issues necessarily at this point with job descriptions of having trained individuals. Those things practically happen on site. Yes, Chris, hi. It might have just been a hi from Chris. Hi, Chris. There was one question that came through, and that was relating to the bargaining council and whether they would get involved in the solar industry, that being the NBCEI, National Bargaining Council for the Electrical Industry of South Africa. In my mind, having gone through the bargaining council provisions, that would include solar installers at that point, which means that you guys are already governed by a bargaining council, where there would be certain imposed minimum wages, your staff members having to belong to certain funds. So I don't know how many of you are aware of that, how many of you are registered, how many of you are following those prescripts, and or if your business is in a position where you're not able to meet those requirements, if you are indeed actually applying for exemption on those.
If anyone has any questions, please put that in the chat box. While everyone is typing, Wilna, I have a question. Where can business owners access contracts that apply to their businesses specifically because people in this industry do make use of part-time or sporadic additions to their business? So where can people access relevant contracts? And maybe you can just talk to what needs to be in those contracts, anything specific that you need to you could lift out.
Perfect, thank you. So generally you would find decent resources on the Department of Labour website, and often on your bargaining council website you would receive contract types. If we're looking at sporadic and or let's call it freelance, Chris, speaking to your questions, answering both at the same time. If you're looking at onboarding somebody for a period of time, you need to be specific as to what the requirement is. I.e., I have a project, the project scope would be for a period of a month, 2 months, 3 months, a couple of weeks. And for this reason, I would require this resource, but I would not require the resource for a longer period. So it's project driven. that you would require somebody, and specifically in the contract, you would then say the contract would be for, let's say hypothetically, a period of 1 month, and or limited to this particular project, and you can name the project, for instance. So with either one ending first, then bringing the contract to an end. I think what's pertinent in that is that you need to have a notice period in place, because you can't just say, oh no, the contract's now ended today. You as a business owner, you are aware of how long the scope still is. So to have, and when I say have those discussions, in HR, having discussions means reducing everything to writing, be that on a WhatsApp, be that on a mail. It doesn't have to be in a formal document where everyone's signed. You need to be able to show that you've submitted it to the individual and reasonably they could have been aware of it. So having to say, you know, your contract would come to an end when this project comes to an end, phase one of this project, and or the purpose for which you were employed will be coming to an end within the next week, hypothetically. So that it's not an immediate situation, specifically if you haven't added in a period. So it needs to be very specific when you are communicating a reason for why somebody would be in a contract. Chris, in answering that, have I answered your question about the freelance? And it's a pleasure. Marisha, have I answered your question as well in that?
You have. I have an additional question. Can you reuse the contract for the same person perpetually, or is there a limit on how many times you can use the same person on this contract when at some point it does become like they are an employee because you've given them the same type of contract over and over? Is there some rule where if you use a person regularly on a freelance contract, at some point they actually become counted as an employee?
Yes, absolutely. So it's all about expectation, because it's relationship driven. So would the person have reasonably, if you always speak about the reasonable person, so would a reasonable person have expected that they would be a permanent individual based on either the practice that you see or what's been written down? Is the test that you would look at, because sort of perpetual contracts have been quote unquote abused, or air hyphens have been abused in the past, where people just do not want to employ somebody permanently. The law is very clear in terms of benefits to individuals that you contract, specifically if it's going to be for a period longer than 6 months, they need to receive the same benefits as somebody that would have been permanently employed within your organization. Generally, the rule of thumb would be that by the third time that you're renewing the contract, the person could reasonably expect it to be permanent. This would be back-to-back contract renewals that we're looking at. However, I think if you are using somebody, let's say, in the beginning of the year, then more towards September, perhaps for a 3-month engagement, so twice a year, and maybe a third time, so maybe a Jan to March, then using them in June for a quick month, for instance, and then in September, December. I don't think there would be a reasonable expectation, but I think the project scope needs to be clearly defined to indicate as to why you're not employing the individual permanently. I think if there is sufficient work and you're onboarding the person regularly, the question would be, why are you not engaging them on a more permanent basis?
I see Peter asked, he just mentioned that he thinks it's a fixed term contract. Can you just explain the difference between a fixed term and a freelance or just a project contract? Is there a difference?
There isn't a difference. So they go by many terms. Fixed term is one of them. You can call them fixed term, you can call them freelance, you can call them limited duration contracts. So there is a difference between a casual contract and a limited duration contract. So a casual contract would literally be somebody that you need on a casual basis. So that would be somebody that you might need once a week, for instance. Those would generally be blue-collar workers that are unskilled labor that you might require on an ad hoc basis to to do general work. So that would be, if we're thinking domestic industry would be the example that I've got. So I might not have a requirement to have a domestic worker even once a week. I might, on an ad hoc basis, want somebody to come and do seasonal cleaning for me, where I might want them once a quarter, hypothetically, to come and wash my curtains. Then I would do a casual 1-day contract with them. So a casual would essentially be somebody that you engage their services for less than 27 hours in a month. Whereas your limited duration contract or your fixed term contract or freelance employment, if you like, are individuals that you would have for a set period exceeding 27 hours a month, for a fixed period for a specific project or a specific reason. If we're thinking female employees, I see predominantly males here, but if you're thinking maternity leave, if you're thinking medical illness where somebody might be off for a period and you need a plug-in, you need additional hands for a particular project. There might be seasonal trade where certain seasons you might be busier and you would need extra capacity to assist you in your business, but once the season is finished, you would not require that person on a full-time basis. These are the kind of criteria that you would implement a fixed-term contract for.
Thank you, Wilna. Another random question. Should business owners run into issues that kind of turns the relationship sour and they end up in the CCMA? Can you speak a little bit to that? What can business owners do, I suppose, to avoid something that ends up in the CCMA? And if they do get there, what do they do?
No, I think interesting question. I think it's pretty much asking how long is a piece of string. You could have followed everything to the book and somebody can still refer to the CCMA. You know, the CCMA is essentially a forum that has been set up to look at whether you have done what you should have done in an employment relationship. And actually, oddly enough, even before you enter an employment relationship, there can be a referral to the CCMA. I think in terms of the CCMA, the first thing is it sounds terrible, but just to remain calm. The individuals at the CCMA, the commissioners, are generally highly trained individuals. They are there firstly to attempt to resolve matters. It's the forum for conciliation, mediation, and then arbitration. So they would do everything they can to conciliate the matter. I would say first things first is to get the information on why you are going to the CCMA, who has referred, what matter or process have they referred, and why will you be going to the CCMA. So that would generally be a 711 form that is completed, and they would then issue a set down form to you, which you would see what is the process. Is it a conciliation? Is it an arbitration? And then to reach out to the CCMA, essentially when you do receive the documentation, i.e. if it is a conciliation or arbitration on one day, to request to split the process, because you don't want two processes happening on one day. The second point would be to actually go to the CCMA. So often people just ignore these notices that they receive. They don't go through to the CCMA, and then they receive default awards. During conciliation, the process is confidential, which means nothing that is said in that process can be used in an arbitration proceeding. In a conciliation, the parties can communicate with each other. They can look at what the person does want that has referred, i.e. I would like my job back, i.e. I would like money, I would like to be reinstated. And you also as an employer have the opportunity to then say, yes, I'm happy to see to that. No, I'm not. It is a negotiation. It is a discussion at that point. I think it's to look at the situation factually and not to become emotional, because often we bring in emotions, but this is what the person has done. The commissioner at that stage in a process has no authority to make a finding and or a decision. So it's about remaining calm and then deciding, you know, what have you done wrong in the process? Do you have a contract? Don't you have a contract? Did you give notice? Did you follow the legal requirements? And also sort of the opportunity cost. They call it a nuisance value. For you to be able to return to the CCMA, what is your opportunity cost? What are you losing in terms of business for you to go back? Does it make sense for you to pay a settlement, even though it might irk you? Does it make sense to pay it and have the matter finalized and or not finalized? My suggestion would, however, be if it is, a matter at the CCMA, then do not hire lawyers. Okay, go to the CCMA, specifically if it's a conciliation. It is set up for you to be able to present your own case. Don't throw good money after bad money by lawyering up to go to the CCMA. If it is an intricate matter where there are, and you're already following a lot of things to the T and it's high risk in terms of finances, then do that. But remember, the CCMA, even if you were woefully wrong, can only award up to a maximum of 24 months salary, in most cases 12 months. Often your lawyer costs is more than that if you're looking at a blue collar junior worker.
I think you described the piece of string beautifully. Thank you. That was very informative and helpful.
It's an absolute pleasure.
All right. Do we have any other questions for either Wilma or for Carel based on what he spoke about? Or any other questions in general? We usually take this time in the Q&A to just ask anything. If anyone has a technical question, we do have Carel in the session with us today with a lot of practical background. Yeah, so if you can think of anything that you want to know or that you're unsure of, please go ahead and ask that in the chat box. Thank you for your question, Marcel. Marcel is saying, is there any material somewhere to prepare for the P4 level 1? There is no specific set of material. We recommend that people do their own research. But if you do feel that you want to get some training before you take the test, we do have a few recommended training partners. These are not people or associations that form part of our association. They are completely individual businesses, but we do feel that we can safely recommend members to them because we know that their materials cover everything that you would need to know. And then what is the price of a physical hybrid test report booklet? I'm going to get the price list and just share it on the chat with you. I'm going to just find the little flyer, 2 seconds. Carel or Anne, do you have anything that you would like to mention before we end the meeting? I see we don't really have any questions coming through. So is there anything that you guys wanted to add before we close?
Marisha, maybe just on the question with regards to the P4 material, it is possible for guys to, on their first attempt, go through the questions to see what the test is all about and then do their research. The idea behind the test is for the test to be an open book exam, because solar is has such a diverse range of products, and all of those products have their own specifications and own criteria with numerous standards. The test does make provision for guys to be able to log in, have a look at the questions, log out, and go and do their research. But that is only, if I remember correctly, that's only possible to do that on the first attempt. On the second and third attempt, you can't log out and log back in again. So for guys that want to write the exams but don't have the money to necessarily attend any courses, they actually do have access to the questions. They'd be able to do their own research, and it might take them a little bit longer to get all the information, but it would be possible. It would be completely possible to do it without spending money on courses if you know what to look for and where to find the right information.
Thank
And
you,
that's
Carel.
it from my side. Thank you.
Wilna, I see we have two questions directed at you from Brett and Charles.
Wait.
Apologies,
So,
unmute.
Yes, Carel.
sorry, who are those questions directed to? Is it possible to connect three-phase inverters to provide?
So there's two directed to Wilna about her topic, and then I see there's a single phase tester which I'll give to you just after Wilna.
Okay, that's cool. Wilna, here you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Carel. So the first question from Brett reads, hi, I'm registered as a sole proprietor and I have one assistant working with me. Is it necessary to register a CK? So as soon as you have a member working for you, that person should receive a pay slip. So there needs to be and UIF should be deducted, dependent on what your payroll is and how you're paying yourself. I'm assuming as a sole proprietor, you're sort of living in the business account, so it would depend on those sorts of things. But yes, I would say at that point, you need to look at how you're going to be paying the person, how are you mitigating the risk if that person gets hurt on a side in terms of workman's compensation. You know, should there be a situation where there is a dispute that is registered, do you have a contract in place? So it's always good in my mind to have a legal entity from which you're running it as soon as you start involving people outside of just yourself, right? I don't know if I've answered your question, perhaps just a thumbs up or a yes before I move on. He does receive a pay slip and UIF. Are you registered for workman's comp and do you have a contract in place? So I think to answer your question, Brett, if you're meeting the criteria, how you're doing it really doesn't matter. The safest way is obviously to have a legal entity that's separate to you. But if you are meeting the requirements where the person is registered and you are compliant, then you need to decide from sort of a tax perspective whether it makes sense for your business. Remember, it's a risk mitigation. There's no set way that you need to address that.
Thank you, Wilna. And then the next one is from Charles. He says, hi, I have a company that has 4 field staff and 1 admin staff. What is the minimum employment regulations that is required? Hope I have worded this correctly.
Employment regulations, perhaps for me, would be the question mark to say, what are we referring to when we say employment regulations? Minimum employment regulations, in my mind, would be what is the minimum that you need in place, is how I'm interpreting that. And the answer to that would be the minimum that you would need to have in place for 5 people as a written contract that you've got with the individuals. It would be payment. Is your payment aligned to the industry or the minimum requirement for your industry? In my mind, obviously engineering and electrical industry, so you would need to be part of the bargaining council. So there would be the prescribed provident fund for the individual, leave provisions, paying your levies over to the council, those sorts of things. So that would be the absolute minimum. Everything above that, you know, whether you're having job descriptions or whether you're doing performance, those things would all be, do you want to or don't you want to? So having the contract, the benefits in terms of leave, your workman's comp and your UIF would be the bare minimums that you would need to have in place.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Wilna. All right, let's look at Dennis's question. Are single phase testers still allowed to sign COCs for single phase solar installations? Carel.
Oh my head. Okay. So Dennis, I'm going to give you the straight answer to this. Industry is divided or split into two. If you look at the guys who are in charge of the electrical sector, it is the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor will allow a single phase tester to issue a COC on a solar powered site. So if you ask me whether it's legal, the answer would be yes, because the Department of Labor approves it. If there is anyone who disagrees with you or disagrees with me, I would be happy to give you Peter Loubser's number. And just send me a WhatsApp. I'll send you Peter Loubser's number from the Department of Labor. You're welcome to phone him and ask him yourself. Peter promised us a document from the Department of Labor which stipulates that, and he has failed to do so. So I am happy to circulate Peter's number far and wide, taking into consideration that this meeting is being recorded. I hope Peter gets a copy of it. But you are welcome to phone Peter and discuss or raise the matter with Peter. This is an extremely emotional topic, and we have some guys that get very upset when they hear that single phase testers are allowed to do it because the ECA says that they can't. The ECA is not a regulatory figure. The ECA has no more power in industry than what AREP has, and they do not manage or maintain the industry. They are purely a non-profit organization like any other industry body is. So are single-phase testers allowed to sign off single-phase solar-powered installations? According to the Department of Labor, yes. So Dennis, I hope that answers your question. If you want Peter's number, please send me a WhatsApp. You're welcome to Google my name. You'll get my number. It shouldn't be too difficult to get it. And then you can send me a WhatsApp and I'll send you Peter's number and you can contact him directly to confirm what I've just said. Then Loyiso Marais, I'm not sure whether I'm jumping the gun, but Loyiso asked a question about, is it possible to connect 3 single-phase inverters to provide 3-phase? Loyiso, it is, but you've got to make sure that you use the right type of inverter. So you can't just take 4 off-the-shelf cheap inverters and connect them together on 3 phases and think that you're going to be getting 3-phase. It doesn't work that way. The sine wave, the different phases have to synchronize, and for this you need to have the ability or the intelligence with the inverters in order to service the 3 separate phases. And make sure that the sine wave and the phases align and synchronize. So is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Can you do it with any single phase inverter? No, you can't. You've got to make sure that you use the right product. And then Sashin says, what is the core difference from an AREP P4 level 2 and Sapphire PV green card? So a core difference for me would be, so the level 1 covers solar PV principles. Level 2 covers slightly more in-depth electrical principles, lighting and surge protection, and mounting structure principles. So level 2 covers information at a different level. It's more electrical, it's more earthing and surge protection, and it's more mounting structures. That would be the difference between level 2. The Sapphire PV green card has a practical assessment. We don't believe it's so in the practical assessment they have 4 guys busy with the same assessment. We don't believe that is necessarily the best way to do it. So we at AREP have a level 3 that has a practical assessment, but it's actually one of your installations or one of your sites that are assessed. So you are assessed according to the hybrid test report, and that forms part of your level 3 assessment. So I do believe that there are distinct differences between the two, the PV green card and the P4 certificate. You could, of course, get a green card with, you could get an AREP green card with the level 2 assessment. So it's a bit confusing, but yeah, gets to more or less the same thing. What else? Marisha, any last questions?
Yes, there's just the one question. Is it the necessary documentation for issuing a COC is the hybrid test report together with the COC document ?
Yes, so every COC has a test report. So when you buy the COC, especially if you buy the pre-printed versions or the printed versions, it has the test report on the one side and the COC on the other side. So if you are going to be doing a solar installation, you could use the hybrid test report as the report and then just complete the other side of the document as the COC part. So it kind of ticks all the boxes. And then Sashin says again, what are the benefits of an AREP level 3? Benefits of an AREP level 3 is bragging rights. I don't have another way of saying this. Yes.
It's also the peer review where they can earn additional income, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, fair enough. So we are going a bit over time. We are trying to create a mechanism where industry can monitor industry, and where one guy has the ability to check another guy's work. And that can be done through the hybrid test report. So the hybrid test report does not necessarily question the guy's design. So you can't go to someone else's site and say, no, but you shouldn't have put the panels on that roof. You should have put it on this roof. The hybrid test report doesn't cover that. The hybrid test report covers, do you have your fuses in the right place? Do you have the right size cable? Do you have isolators where you need to have them? How many panels do you have in a string? What's the voltage? Are the voltages correct according to your MPPTs and that kind of thing? So it checks the boxes with regards to how you've done your installation. And the level 3, if you have a level 3, there is a charge for doing a site assessment, and the site assessment cost is about 3,500 Rand. That comes to AREP. But if you are, as a contractor, want to go and do that assessment, AREP will pay you 2,500 Rand to do the assessment. So the guy who does the assessment, the hybrid test report assessment, earns 2,500 Rand for doing the assessment, and AREP keeps 1,000 Rand for admin or whatever other purposes. So there are a couple of benefits. As a level 3, you also have I think they're busy creating the page for the level 3 guys. At the moment, there aren't that many level 3 guys, so we are busy working on broadening that base. Walter says, can anyone do a large-scale solar design, or are there requirements in terms of qualifications and accreditations? Walter, only if you want to. Depends on how well you know your engineer. So if you want the design to be accepted by the municipality, it has to be signed off by a professional engineer. If you can do the design to satisfy what the engineer wants, he will just sign it off. So can you do a design? You can do a design. So you do the design, you create the line diagram, you give the line diagram to the engineer signs it off. If you can't do the line diagram, you have to explain to the engineer how your design was done. He will then create the line diagram and sign it off. So it's really depends on who you're doing it for and what you want to get out of it. So if it's municipal or for banks, it has to be PRNG. If it's just for your customer, it doesn't have to be PRNG. You just need to have a line diagram against your DB board wherever you do the installation, and that design can be done by anyone. Is there any RLP in place for getting recognition? Oh, that's RPL. Is there any recognition of prior learning in place for getting up to P4 level 3? No, no RPL, just do the job. Pass level 1 test, pass the level 2 test, and then once you've passed level 1 and level 2, level 3 is after you've done an installation, you request an inspection or an assessment, and Marisha will probably at this stage still be in charge of that process. Guys, and I hope that has answered the question. Thanks to Wilna. I see she's just dropped off. Guys, our meeting is going a bit over time, but I think we've just about covered all the questions.
Just one more question. Sorry. John says, does every new solar installation require a COC, or is the AREP test report sufficient on its own?
So the AREP test report is just a report that you use to issue the COC. Unfortunately, it requires a COC. You don't have a choice there. So whether you use the AREP test report as the supporting document before issuing the COC, or whether you use another test report, doesn't matter. You unfortunately have to issue a COC. Guys, the COC is really just a document that says the installation was checked, and at the time of checking the installation, it was deemed to be safe. That's the only thing the COC said, is we've checked the installation and at the time it was safe. And unfortunately, you have to confirm the safety of your installation by issuing a COC. So that will, the meeting recording is definitely available. It's always shared. I think it's also posted on the AREP YouTube channel. Guys, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the AREP YouTube channel. There's regularly new stuff going up there or being loaded up onto the channel. And I think it's more often than not useful information to add. Peter, that's fine. Happy to send you guys Peter Loubser's number. Please send me a WhatsApp. I think, Marisha, you're welcome to circulate my number when you circulate the meeting recording link for the guys who want Peter's number. They're welcome to get it from me.
Okay, we'll do that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marisha.